In 1986, 3 siblings were rescued from a hoarder house in rural Indiana. Their parents were arrested. The news made headlines, but in the background of one photograph was a 4th child, a girl no one could identify. No records, no name, no follow-up. Now, nearly 40 years later, one of the rescued siblings returns to the house and finds a sealed trap door beneath the porch. What she discovers rewrites everything they thought they escaped from. Before we begin, don't forget to hit subscribe for more cinematic true crime mysteries based on real cold case patterns, long-buried secrets, and impossible disappearances. August 14, 1986. Location, Floyd County, Indiana. In this prologue, we open on a small-town newspaper office as an intern loads developed photos from a crime scene onto a light board. One image shows the rescue of the 3 Dawson children from a collapsing, trash-filled farmhouse. But in the back, near the porch steps, a 4th child is visible, half-shadowed, barefoot, her face partially turned toward the camera. No one on the scene recalled her. Her image was cropped from the printed photo and forgotten. May 3, 2024. Location, Floyd County, Indiana. The rental car crunched up the gravel drive like it remembered the weight of tragedy. Tall grass swallowed the path on both sides, green and overgrown, wrapping around the tires as if trying to pull the vehicle back. Mae Dawson hadn't seen the house since she was 8 years old, but it still stood at the end of the drive, sagging under the weight of time and rot. The Dawson House. That's what the newspapers called it in 1986, back when everything fell apart. Now, nearly 40 years later, the only sound was the whine of Sika's and the crackling of her nerves. She parked under the rusted remains of what used to be the carport. The boards had buckled. The tin roof slumped in the middle like a broken spine. The house beyond was 2 stories of peeling paint, busted gutters, and sun-bleached windows. It looked exactly like it should. Haunted. Mae stepped out, gravel crunching beneath her flats. She wore black slacks, a loose cotton shirt, and a messenger bag slung over one shoulder. She had brought only what she needed: gloves, a flashlight, her phone, and the photograph. She stood there a moment, hand resting on the roof of the car, trying to control her breathing. The last time she'd stood in this yard, 2 social workers were dragging her and her younger brother through a sea of beer bottles and newspapers, past a living room full of trash bags and sour-smelling blankets. She had blocked most of it out, or so she thought. Now it all came rushing back. The smell, the noise, the hands that grabbed them, the screaming, and the porch. Mae climbed the 3 front steps slowly, pausing at the landing. The porch sagged under her weight, but it didn't give. She reached into her bag and pulled out the laminated photo, the one she had printed from the microfilm archive at the county records office 2 weeks earlier. August 14, 1986. 3 kids being led out of the house by Child Protective Services. Mae, her twin brother Mark, and their baby sister Bethany. But in the photo, just over Mae's shoulder by the bottom of the steps, stood another child. A girl, maybe 6 or 7. Long, dirty blonde hair, no shoes, eyes cast toward the camera like she'd been caught mid-breath. She wasn't in any of the follow-up photos. Her name wasn't in any reports. Mae had spent 2 weeks combing through case files and transcripts. Not one mention. She'd shown the photo to Mark. He shrugged, said, "I don't remember any other kid, probably a neighbor." But Mae remembered something different, something deeper, a tug, a name she couldn't place, a voice in the dark. Now standing on the porch again, she looked at where the girl had been standing. The same spot, same angle. 4 decades later, the floorboards were warped, a long crack running down the center. Mae crouched and ran her fingers along the edge of one plank. Software, slight give. She felt it before she saw it. A seam in the wood, not rot but division. A square maybe 3 feet across. A door. She stood, heart thuching. The trapdoor hadn't been there in 1986. Or if it had been buried beneath garbage and silence. The county had condemned the house after the rescue, but her arranged Aunt Lorna had bought the property for a song. Kept it for memories, she said in her will. And now, with Lorna gone, the house was Mae's. She hadn't planned to return, but then the photo surfaced and she saw her, the 4th child. Mae stepped back, pulled out her phone, and started a voice memo. May 3, 3:47 p.m. I'm on the porch of the old Dawson house, confirming presence of a possible sealed crawl space or trap door beneath the front boards. Visible outline appears original or added before 86. Preparing to pry open, she stopped recording, slipped on her gloves, and pulled a crowbar from the bag. The wood groaned as she worked the metal into the seam. Dry splinters cracked free. It took 3 tries, but eventually the board shifted, then lifted. The trapdoor was real. Beneath it, a pitch-black square, maybe 5 feet deep. The scent of rotted fabric, mold, and metal hit her immediately. May gagged and stepped back. She covered her mouth and shined her flashlight down. It wasn't empty. Inside the hollow cavity was a mound of tattered blankets, old dolls, plastic utensils, and a child's shoe. A pink canvas Mary Jane with a star patch on the side. Dirt and hair clung to it like it had been down there for years. May froze. Her heart kicked in her chest like a trapped animal. She took a photo with her phone, hand shaking. As she looked at the screen, she realized something else. In the dust along the inside of the hatch, someone had scratched words, 4 of them barely visible under the beam of light. I am the 4th. May dropped to her knees. Oh my God. Then her phone buzzed. A call. Mark, she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Hey, you at the house? He asked. His voice was flat, guarded. Yeah, she said. I found something. A pause. You shouldn't be there. May swallowed. There's a hatch under the porch, Mark, with stuff inside, toys, clothes. I think she was real. Mark didn't respond. Do you remember her? May whispered. The girl from the photo. Another long pause. Then, no. But his voice was different now. Tight, like it was hiding something. May stood staring down at the hatch. You're lying, she said quietly. And for the first time in 38 years, she heard him breathe like someone remembering a nightmare. I didn't think she'd still be there. May 3rd, 2024. Location, Dawson House, Floyd County, Indiana. May didn't speak for a moment. Mark's voice lingered in her ear, tiny and distant. But those 6 words echoed louder than the cicadas around her. I didn't think she'd still be there. Not who? Not what are you talking about? Not May. You're losing it. He knew. May stepped back from the trap door, her heart racing. What do you mean? Still be there. On the other end, Mark's breath hitched. She could hear him pacing. Look, I didn't mean that. You're twisting it. You just admitted something was there. Someone May snapped. Mark, I found her shoe. There's writing inside the hatch. Somebody was kept here. No one was. Don't lie to me, May shouted. And her voice cracked through the overgrown trees like a whip. Her hands were shaking. She dropped to her knees again, peering into the dark space below. You said you didn't remember her. Now you say you didn't think she'd still be there. Which is it? Silence, then a click. He hung up. May stared at her phone in disbelief. A wave of nausea climbed from her stomach. The same kind she'd felt as a child when she used to wake up in the middle of the night, to the sound of something, someone scratching behind the walls. She slipped the phone into her pocket and turned her flashlight back to the hatch. The air drifting from it was stale and sour. Beneath the debris was a dirt floor, uneven and cracked, with strands of torn insulation hanging like cobwebs from the wooden joists above. She reached for the crowbar again and widened the opening. The floorboards groaned, but the porch held. May clicked on the camera app and started recording video this time, narrating through her breath. Entering the crawl space, evidence of a concealed compartment, found clothing items, a single child's shoe, and what appeared to be nesting materials. Text etched into the side wall reads, I am the 4th, beginning descent. She lowered one foot onto a crossbeam, then slowly climbed down into the space, knees bent, flashlight clenched between her teeth. The space was narrow, claustrophobic. Her head barely cleared the joists above. She crouched low, scanning the corner where the shoe had been. There was more now that her eyes adjusted. A tiny plastic mirror, a matted hairbrush, a pile of torn book pages, all from different children's books, most faded, some shredded like someone had chewed or ripped them in frustration. May knelt beside the debris and picked up the mirror. Its back was cracked. The glass smudged and cloudy, but when she tilted it, a faint shape appeared in the reflection, a faint outline on the wall behind her. She turned. There was something carved into the wood support beam, deep and jagged as if done by a shaking hand. Not words this time, a drawing. 4 stick figures, 3 with X's over their heads, 1 left untouched. The untouched figure had long hair and a circle around it. May stared, her throat tightened. A noise behind her, creaking. May scrambled up and turned off her flashlight. She held her breath. Silence. Then another noise. Closer. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, a voice called from above. Distant, cracking like it came through a blown-out speaker. Hello. May froze. Another voice followed. Sharper, we're with the sheriff's department. Step out onto the porch. She blinked. The sheriff? She pulled herself back up through the hatch just in time to see 2 uniformed deputies standing at the edge of the yard, hands resting casually on their belts. A white patrol truck idled behind them. Miss Dawson? One asked, spotting her rising from the porch shadows. We received a report. Neighbor said someone was breaking into the house. May exhaled hard, the adrenaline catching up to her. I wasn't breaking in. I own the house. One of the deputies, a tall man with thinning hair, climbed the steps and looked at the partially pried open hatch. Looks like you were prying something open. It's mine, May said. The house. My aunt left it to me. I've got the documents in my bag. He nodded, unconvinced. Mind if we take a look? May hesitated, then gestured toward the opening. You'll want to see this anyway. The next 30 minutes moved fast. She showed them the hatch, the shoe, the etchings. One officer took photos while the other called it in. Soon a detective arrived. Detective Howren, mid-50s, sun-weathered face, pale gray blazer over jeans. The kind of man who looked like he'd grown up in town and seen every flavor of decay. He knelt by the trap door and whistled. And you say you just found this today? Yes. Mind if I ask what brought you back here? May handed him the laminated photo from her bag. Howren studied it, his face tightening. This is from the 1986 rescue, isn't it? May nodded. She's not listed, Howren muttered, tapping the girl's image. No name, no record of a 4th child. And you're sure this isn't some neighbor kid who wandered into the frame? May looked him square in the eye. Number she lived here, and someone made sure she was forgotten. Howren looked back at the house, now glowing amber in the late afternoon light. The porch boards creaked under his boots as he rose. We're going to secure the site, he said. Forensics will need to go over every inch. But if there's truth to this, he didn't finish because they both knew what this meant. The story they were told in 1986 was a lie. That evening, back at her motel, May sat on the edge of the bed with the photo in her hands. The TV played some muted local news segment in the background, but she wasn't listening. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. There was no 4th child. May's hands went cold. She stared at the screen. Then she looked back at the photo at the barefoot girl standing half-shadowed by the porch, forgotten by time, erased from the record. Her eyes stared right through the lens. Right through May, she whispered to herself, voice barely audible. Then why do I remember her name? May 4th, 2024. Location, Floyd County Sheriff's Office, Indiana. The sheriff's office hadn't changed much since 1986. Same linoleum floors, same coffee-stained furniture, same cracked bulletin board where missing posters once hung, curling at the edges like leaves in a drought. May remembered being here. She didn't remember the layout or the paint color, but the feeling, that thick, sour dread, was still in the air. Detective Howren led her down a short hallway and into a small windowless interview room. It smelled like copier toner and worn-out air conditioning. Have a seat, he said, nodding toward the metal chair. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee. May shook her head. He settled across from her, setting a recorder on the table between them. He pressed the red button, a soft click. Detective John Howren, Floyd County Sheriff's Office, May 4th, 2024. Interview with May Dawson regarding the 1986 rescue from 1120 Firebrush Lane and newly discovered evidence of a potential 4th minor. He paused. May stared at her hands. Take your time, Howren said. I'm going to ask some questions, but if you need a break, just say so. She nodded. First, he began gently. Can you tell me how you came into possession of that photo? May took a breath. It was in the county archive. I was researching old property records and crime scene documentation. I found the original negative from the rescue. And what made you start looking into it? May hesitated. I saw the photo online once cropped. Just me, Mark, and Bethany. But the full version, when I saw it, it felt wrong, like something had been erased. And when I looked closer, I saw her, the fourth kid. Had you ever seen her before that? Yes, May said quietly. I think I remembered her. I didn't before, not clearly. But when I saw the photo, I knew her face. I knew the name, even if I couldn't say it right away, like it had been pushed out of my head. Howard leaned forward. Can you say it now? May stared down at the table. Then she whispered, Kala. The name settled in the air like ash. Howard scribbled something in his notebook. Kala. Do you remember anything else about her? May swallowed. She used to sing at night. When it was dark and we were locked in our rooms, I could hear her. She used to tap the wall between us. We'd knock back and forth. Howard raised his eyebrows. Your brother and sister don't recall her. I know, May said. Mark swears he doesn't. But when I told him I found the hatch, he slipped. He said he didn't think she'd still be there. Howard's eyes sharpened. Still be there? May nodded. The detective sighed. I'll be speaking with him. He shifted gears. Tell me about what you found in the crawl space. Describe everything. May listed it off slowly. The pink shoe, the dolls, the mirror, the writing on the wall. I am the fourth. The drawing of 4 stick figures, 3 with X's, 1 circled. When she finished, Howard was silent for a long moment. He tapped the pen against his notebook. We've got forensics combing through the house right now. From what they found so far, there's no question the crawl space was occupied. For how long? We don't know yet. May exhaled slowly. So, I'm not crazy. No, Howard said. You're not. And you may have just reopened a forgotten case. He stood and turned off the recorder. That's all I need for now, but May, this might get worse before it gets better. She stepped outside 20 minutes later, eyes adjusting to the morning light. The parking lot shimmered with heat already. The old house was taped off. Crime scene crews crawling through the shadows of her childhood like archaeologists unearthing a forgotten tomb. May made her way to the car. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Stop remembering, she never had a name. She dropped the phone. Her hand trembled as she bent to pick it up. This time she didn't call Mark. She opened her bag and pulled out the second copy of the photo, the one she hadn't shown Howard, because in this version, her finger had smudged something when she scanned it. She hadn't noticed until later when she enhanced the image on her laptop. Kala's feet were bare, but in the smudged magnified version, just beneath her right foot, almost hidden in the grass, something was visible, a chain connected to a stake in the dirt. May stared at the image again. Kala hadn't just been there, she'd been tethered. That night, unable to sleep, May drove out to the old property again. The house was sealed. Yellow tape fluttered in the dark, but she didn't go to the house. She went around the side to the broken-down trailer where her father used to keep his tools. It had been padlocked for decades, but the padlock had rusted through. Inside, it smelled of grease and dead air. May swept her flashlight across the walls, tools, broken furniture, old paint cans, and then, tucked behind a tarp, a wooden box about the size of a microwave. She crouched. The lid creaked as she lifted it. Inside, dozens of index cards stained and curled, each with a date and a name, except for one, just a card with a date, July 12, 1986, and a label, unnamed, bright hair, unregistered. May felt her blood go cold. They had cataloged her like property, and they never gave her a name. May 5, 2024. Location 1, 120 Firebrush Lane, Floyd County, Indiana. The forensics truck rolled up just after 9 a.m., tires crunching against the gravel as a team of crime scene techs stepped out. May stood at the edge of the overgrown yard, arms folded, watching the dust settle around the yellow tape. She hadn't slept. After finding the index card in the trailer, unnamed, bright hair, unregistered, she sat in her motel room the rest of the night, staring at it, holding it, turning it over in her hands like a relic. It wasn't just the words, it was the implication. Kala was documented, known, cataloged like the rest of them, and yet somehow erased. Detective Howard spotted her and motioned her over. "We're about to go under the porch," he said. "You don't have to be here for this." "I do," May replied. He didn't argue. The crime scene crew had widened the trapdoor May had uncovered. A plywood rig supported the weak board surrounding it, and the interior cavity had been scanned for structural safety. Beneath the porch, the crawl space extended further than May originally realized, an L-shaped bend in the back that curved under the stairs. "Anything you want to tell us before we go in?" one of the texts asked, snapping on a pair of nitrile gloves. May hesitated. She carved drawings into the wood names. At least I think she tried to look for the word Kala and anything chained to the beams. The tech nodded and ducked down. May crouched nearby, watching through the open trap door as they swept the flashlight across the dark. Dust swirled, beetles skittered. "Then, Detective," one of the techs called out. His voice was tight. "You should see this." Howard went down first. May followed. The crawl space had changed since she'd last been in it. Not just cleaned out, but expanded. More of the space had been cleared by the texts, and beneath the porch steps was a shallow dugout pit, 4 feet wide, about 2 feet deep. A child's mattress lay across it, molded, discolored. "Jesus," Howard muttered. This wasn't a hiding place. This was a room. The walls of the pit were carved with scores of deep scratch marks, not randomly, but in groups of 4. Over and over again, claw-like, desperate. Above the pit, nailed into the joist, was a wooden sign, not a factory-made one. Hand-carved crooked letters, burned at the edges. Princess Pit. May's breath hitched. The flashlight shifted. Beside the mattress, tangled in old rope and pink plastic chain links, was a pile of torn fabric, a ripped nightgown decorated with faded unicorns. Next to it sat a ceramic dish, and on that dish a shriveled, mummified bouquet of dandelions, a child's attempt at a gift. May covered her mouth. Another tech called from behind the crawl space bend. "Detective, we found something else." May followed them around the L-curve. Her knees scraped against the packed dirt. The beam of the flashlight hit something metallic. A small ventilation grill about a foot across embedded into the wall's support beam. Behind it was a narrow chute, impossibly small for a person, but wide enough to pass objects through. On the other side, a dark cavity. "Where does that lead?" May asked. The tech replied, "Maybe, but the house doesn't have a full basement." Howard frowned. "Not officially." One of the techs reached into the chute with a gloved hand and pulled something out. A scrap of paper folded, yellowed with age. Howard unfolded it. The handwriting was childlike, jagged, done in red crayon. "Dear May, you knocked back. Thank you. I'm still waiting. I'm still here. I'm not scared anymore." May staggered back a step. She remembered it. The knocking, the rhythm. She used to think it was mice behind the wall. Then she started knocking back. 4 taps, then 3, then 1. She used to call it the wall game. She thought it was Mark, but it wasn't. It was Kala. Later that day in Howard's office, the evidence was laid out on the table. The dish, the doll fragments, the shoe, the gown, the crayon note, the carved beam. "You said your parents were arrested for neglect," Howard said, "but no charges of abuse." May nodded. "They claimed there were only 3 children. No neighbor saw a 4th. No hospital records, no birth certificate, no foster system paperwork." May stared at the crayon note. What if they hid her before CPS ever arrived? What if she was never supposed to be found? Howard looked grim. "Then someone went to great lengths to erase her, and we have a body to find." That night, May sat in the motel tub, knees to her chest. The lights were off. Only the pale yellow glow from the parking lot outside the blinds lit the room. She listened to the sounds of dripping pipes and imagined her little sister Bethany sleeping in the room next door, unaware of any of this. May hadn't called her. Not yet. Bethany was only 4 years old when they were rescued. Her memories were a soft blur. May had protected her from the truth once. Could she do it again? Her phone buzzed on the sink. She climbed out of the tub, dripping, and picked it up. Another message. Unknown number. Do not dig the garden. She was never planted. She was discarded. May's fingers shook. This wasn't random. Someone was watching. Someone who knew the house. Someone who used the same language they used back then. Discarded. Unregistered. Bright hair. She stared into the mirror, breath fogging the glass. And for the first time in 38 years, she remembered something buried so deep it didn't feel like memory, more like a whispered warning from behind the wall. A lullaby sung through the slats at night. 4th is not a name to say. 4th will be the one to stay. 1 for food and 2 for light, 3 for sleep and 4 for night. May whispered the words aloud, eyes wide, heart pounding. She hadn't thought of that song in decades, but now it was back and she knew what it meant. Calla was the 4th, and she was never meant to leave. May 6, 2024. Location 120 Firebrush Lane, Interior, Floyd County, Indiana. The wallpaper peeled back like old skin. May stood in what had once been the living room of the Dawson house, now a skeleton of its former self. Forensic crews had cleared out most of the rotten rubble. Boards had been stripped, carpet ripped. The house felt like an excavation site, but May wasn't looking at the floor. She was staring at the wall where the family's television used to hang. Behind the floral wallpaper, something bulged, a warped spot, subtle but unmistakable. She reached for her multi-tool and began to peel the paper away. It came loose with a slow hiss, revealing splintered wood and a small rectangular cutout. Howard had left her alone for the day, said the house was cleared for now. But May knew better. The house hadn't given up its last secret yet. She tapped the cutout hollow, fingers trembling. She pried it open. Inside was a cassette tape, unlabeled, dust-covered, wedged behind the wall for decades. May sat back on her heels. This wasn't just forgotten. It had been hidden. Back at the sheriff's office, Howard examined the tape under a desk lamp. Where'd you find it again? In the wall, living room behind the wallpaper. He turned it over. No label, no timestamp. You sure this is from the 8S? May pointed to the casing. That's a Fuji FXI. That specific shell design was only made between 1984 and 1987. Howard nodded, mildly impressed. You know your tapes. She didn't tell him she used to record lullabies for Bethany on one, or that her father used to make them listen to sermons he recorded from the radio, always over blank cassettes, always without labels. He didn't want them to know what was coming. Howard called in a forensics technician and had the tape loaded into a refurbished player used for digitizing evidence. Static, a hiss, then a low tone, then a man's voice. Familiar, monotone. This is documentation. Subject 4 continues to resist sleep and food conditioning. Isolation protocol resumed. Nightlight revoked. May's blood froze. Behavior inconsistent with siblings. Subject exhibits defiant traits not suitable for transition. There was a pause, then a faint whimpering in the background. A child's voice barely audible. Please, I'll be good. May covered her mouth. The man's voice resumed. Begin reinforcement cycle. Repeat the rhyme. Then a chorus of 3 children chanting her and her siblings. 1 for food and 2 for light, 3 for sleep and 4 for night. The tape hissed. A faint click. The recording looped again. The tech paused the tape. Howard stared at the device like it had grown teeth. That voice. It's my father, May whispered. He recorded everything. That's why he had the tapes. She stopped. Couldn't finish. Howard stood abruptly and stepped into the hallway. May sat there shaking, staring at the tape machine. And then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She didn't pass the test. That's why she stayed. She didn't realize she'd begun crying until she saw the droplets hit the desk. That night, May returned to the house alone. The lock was broken now, the front door held closed with little more than a zip tie and a note. Active investigation. Do not enter. But she didn't care. She had to find out where the voices came from, the reinforcement cycle, the conditioning. That wasn't parenting, that was programming. She walked room to room, her flashlight carving slices through the darkness. She didn't call Mark. She hadn't spoken to him in 2 days. He hadn't answered her texts, hadn't returned her voicemails. May stepped into the hallway. A breeze kissed her skin. Cool, stale from somewhere below. Not the porch, not the crawl space, the floor vent beneath the hall rug. She rolled it back. There, just beside the cold air return grate, was a square metal cover sealed with screws. She ran back to her car, grabbed her tools, and returned to unscrew the panel. When she lifted it, a sour gust of air spilled upward. There was a tunnel, a man-made shaft, less than 3 feet high, wood-paneled, drywalled, soundproof foam on the ceiling, a camera mount screwed into the corner. May crawled in. The air was thick, but the tunnel led to a small chamber beneath the floor, and inside was a metal chair bolted to the concrete. A tray beside it, a box of old vintage My Little Pony toys, all brand new, tags still on. Bribes on the far wall, a cracked mirror etched in red crayon. I am the 4th. They said I failed. I hate pink. I am not bad. May fell to her knees. The scent of old sweat and tears lingered in the drywall. This wasn't just where Kala was, it was where they broke her. When May emerged an hour later, she sat on the edge of the porch steps and watched the sky dim into dusk. A neighbor's porch light flickered on in the distance. Somewhere a dog barked. Her phone rang. Mark. She answered without speaking. He didn't say hello, just you found the room, didn't you? May said nothing. She never passed their test, he said. They called her defective, disobedient, said she couldn't be reformed like we were. May's voice cracked. We were children. I know. Why didn't you tell me she existed? Mark's voice cracked too. Because I didn't know until they took her away. They erased her, May, like she was a mistake. I was 7. I didn't understand. But I remember the day she stopped singing through the wall. They told me it was a dream. May clenched her jaw. She was real. I know, he whispered. Now I remember. He hung up. May looked out across the yard, and for the first time she said her name aloud, not in fear, not in confusion, but in defiance. Kala. And the wind answered like a whisper behind the boards. May 7th, 2024. Location 1, 120 Firebrush Lane, Furnace Room. The door to the furnace room hadn't been opened in decades. May stood at the edge of the rusted handle, gloves on, crowbar in hand. The hallway smelled like dust and dry rot. And even though the rest of the house had been gutted by forensics, this door was still sealed shut, not padlocked, just painted over, dozens of layers thick, as if the house itself had tried to bury it. The knob broke off when she turned it. The crowbar did the rest. The door creaked open with a noise like lungs exhaling after holding their breath too long. Inside, blackness. May stepped in slowly, flashlight shaking in her hand. The furnace room was small, no windows, cinder block walls. The air was thick and heavy with old insulation and the faintest trace of burned rubber. The furnace itself was a beast, cast iron hulking, long since disconnected, but it hadn't been removed. Its mouth gaped open, jagged at the edges like rusted teeth. May walked to it. Then she saw it. Nestled in the ash at the back of the chamber was a porcelain doll, scorched and cracked, one eye missing. Its head was tilted unnaturally, and its dress had mostly burned away. But what remained was clear. A name handwritten across the hemline in faded red marker. Kala. May stumbled backward. The doll had never belonged to her or to Bethany or to Mark. Her mother had forbidden porcelain dolls. Eyes like spies, she used to say. They watch you. They whisper things at night. So who gave this one a name? She sat on the back porch steps later that afternoon, the doll sealed in an evidence bag beside her, waiting for Howard to arrive. Her hands were scraped, her face streaked with sweat and soot. He pulled up in an unmarked vehicle, got out slowly, and walked toward her with a look that said, I believe you now. May handed him the bag. He looked at the doll, his jaw tightening. I think they burned her things, she said, one at a time. After she was taken, Howard looked around the porch, the crawl space, the conditioning room. Now this, I've never seen a case like this in my career. She was never a case, May replied. That's the point. She wasn't reported missing because they never let her exist on paper. He nodded. We're checking all missing children reports from 1980 to 1986, cross-referencing any Jane does. But if she was never documented, she'll never be found in a system. May finished for him. Unless we find her. Howard reached into his pocket and handed her something. This came from evidence storage, from the first investigation. You might want to see it. May unfolded the aged piece of paper. It was a floor plan sketch, crudely drawn in pencil, a child's hand, labeled rooms, May's room, Mark's room, bathroom, mom and dad, and then in the center of the house, my room, but not allowed. Next to it, a series of stick figures behind bars. 4-1 was circled. May stared at it. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper like she was touching a memory. This wasn't mine, she said, or Mark's. Bethany couldn't draw yet, Howard said. We found it folded inside a dresser drawer stuck between the boards. No name, no fingerprints they could use at the time. It was hers, May whispered. Kala's room. Not allowed. That night, May dreamed of the furnace room. In her dream, the doll stood up on blackened legs and spoke with her sister's voice. Not Bethany, but the fourth voice, the one that had been scrubbed from cassette tapes and photographs and court reports. The doll said, They put me in the dark so I couldn't be seen, and then they told me I was only real when I obeyed. Then it reached toward May's mouth with tiny ceramic hands. "Give me my name back." May woke up choking. The next morning, she drove to the hospital where her mother had been placed in long-term care. Delia Dawson, age 81, legally incompetent, diagnosed with vascular dementia, post-stroke aphasia, no visitors in 5 years. The staff said she barely spoke, rarely responded, mostly just stared out the window at the bird feeder. May sat across from her in a plastic chair in the sunroom. Her mother's face was pale and slack, wispy gray hair, hands curled at the wrists. May placed the laminated photo on the table, the one from the rescue, cropped. Then she placed the original beside it. Delia blinked. The fourth child stood clearly in the full frame, barefoot, forgotten. "Who is she?" May asked quietly. Delia didn't answer. May leaned closer. "I remember her name. So do you. You made her say it. You made us pretend she didn't exist." But she did. Her mother's head tilted slightly, eyes on the window on the feeder. A cardinal landed on the ledge, then soft as breath. 4 was too loud. May's eyes widened. Delia's lip twitched. 4 tried to bite. Silence. Then 4 didn't sleep. 4 didn't listen. So 4 had to be quiet. May's voice trembled. What happened to her? Delia blinked slowly. Her mouth moved. May leaned in and her mother said in a rusted whisper, "He buried her where the light doesn't go." May 8th, 2024. Location 120 Firebrush Lane, lower crawl space. The next morning, May stood in the middle of the ruined living room, holding her mother's words in her chest like a lit match. "He buried her where the light doesn't go." Howard stood nearby, flipping through a stack of old floor plans that had been recovered from the county archives. None of them included the Princess Pit, the conditioning shaft, or the secret ventilation tunnel. The official blueprints ended at the porch. "What if there's more?" May asked. Howard looked up. "You think there's another room?" "I think they built this house with places meant to hide people, not things." She crossed the room and stepped onto the exposed sub-F floor. Beneath the torn carpet was a grid of joists, insulation, and dirt. In one corner, under where the couch used to sit, she noticed a grate that didn't match the others. A rusted rectangular panel held down by bolts, not screws. Howard came to her side. "You ever seen a vent sealed like this?" May asked. He crouched and ran his hand along the metal. "Number not for HVAC. Could be access to plumbing or something else." May grabbed a wrench and went to work. The bolts were old, rusted through. One by one they gave way until finally she pried the panel free. Beneath was a tight square tunnel sloping downward, maybe 2 feet high, pitch black inside with a faint scent of clay and rot rising from the depths. No ductwork, no wiring, just a tunnel cut into the dirt, shored up with wood panels and rebar. "Jesus," Halloran muttered. "This goes under the foundation." May slid in without hesitation. Howard grabbed a flashlight and followed. The tunnel descended gradually for about 20 feet, then leveled into a low, narrow corridor reinforced with plastic siding and chicken wire. A rat darted past May's hand. She didn't flinch. The air grew colder. They reached a dead end, a wood-planked wall sealed tight with an old padlock drilled directly into the studs. May turned to Howard. This wasn't for ventilation. Howard nodded grimly. This was a holding space. He radioed the team above for bolt cutters. Within minutes a tech arrived, crawling halfway into the tunnel and passing the tools to Howard, and the lock snapped with a loud crack. Howard pulled the panel open. Behind it was a buried room. 8x10 fort. Wood floor, insulated walls, no light fixtures, no windows, just the smell of damp earth, mildew, and something else beneath it. Something metallic and old blood maybe, or rust. In the center of the room sat a small wooden rocking chair, child-sized. May entered first, shining her light along the walls. There were scratches, thousands of them. Not words, not drawings, just desperate claw marks everywhere. Then she saw the bed frame in the corner, low, rusted. On top of it, a blanket sewn with princess crowns and pink thread, tattered, molded. Underneath, something wrapped in plastic sheeting. May stopped breathing. Howard stepped beside her, his face hardening. "Stay back," he knelt, pulled on gloves. Unwrapped the edge of the sheeting. Inside, bones small, curled into a fetal position, and clutched in the child's hands, still intact, miraculously, a tiny ceramic butterfly. May fell to her knees, her eyes wide. "I gave her that," she whispered. "I dropped it through the grate. When she cried at night, I gave it to her." She reached for it, but Howard gently pushed her back. "We'll preserve it," he said. "May, I'm sorry." She didn't respond because she wasn't looking at the bones anymore. She was looking at the wall behind the bed where someone had etched with their fingernail or a nail or a broken shard of something. "I was the fourth. My name was Kala. Please don't forget me." That evening, the remains were bagged, tagged, and sent to the county coroner. DNA testing would follow, but everyone in that crawl space already knew who it was. Howard gave May a ride back to her motel. They didn't speak until the car was parked. He looked at her carefully. "Do you want to testify if this goes to trial?" She shook her head slowly. "I want to bury her. I want to give her a name. I want to put a stone in the ground and mark it with her real name, not a number, not a failure." Kayla Howard nodded. "You'll get that." As he started the car again, May stared out the window and whispered, "She remembered me." Back in her motel room, May sat on the bed, staring at the butterfly. The ceramic was cracked, but the paint was still bright. A blue swirl on each wing. A happy face on the center. She had made it in first grade. A Mother's Day gift, but her mother never took it, so she gave it to the girl on the wall, and Kala had held it until the end. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "You dug too deep. Now the others will come." May didn't reply. She turned the phone off, walked to the bathroom, and flushed the SIM card down the toilet. Then she sat in silence. And somewhere far off in her memory or in the echo of the bones they had just unearthed, she heard that old knock again. 4 taps, then 3, then 1. May 9th, 2024. Location, May's childhood bedroom. 1120 Firebrush Lane. May hadn't returned to her childhood bedroom since the day they were taken from the house. Back then it had been a hoarder's nest of rotting blankets, dolls with missing eyes, and the sharp, sour scent of mold climbing up the walls like ivy. But now, with the debris cleared and the sun filtering through the cracked window, it looked almost normal. Almost. She stepped inside slowly, scanning the stripped walls, the gouged floorboards, the discolored corner where a space heater once started a small electrical fire. The built-in closet still stood, warped but intact. Inside was a shelf where May used to hide drawings she didn't want their father to find. He hated scribbles, called them rebellion. She opened the closet and knelt before the shelf. Her fingers touched something soft wedged in the corner, a stuffed rabbit stiff with age, its eyes clouded with dust. She turned it over. Sewn into the back crudely was a patch made from pink corduroy. She tugged at the thread. It unraveled. Inside the lining was a small notebook wrapped in plastic. May stared at it, breath caught in her throat. The notebook was no bigger than a deck of cards bound with blue yarn, pages curled and stained. On the first page, in child's handwriting, "If I'm not here, I'm still here. Find the butterflies. They show the way. I am Kala. I was loved once." May's hands trembled. She flipped through the pages. They were filled with drawings, butterflies, spirals, stars, and beneath each one, a name. Not hers, not Mark's, not Bethy's, but others. Angela, pink butterfly. Tessa, green butterfly. Mira, orange spiral. Eve, double star. Me, blue butterfly, alone. Each drawing was placed next to a number and a location beneath the stairs under the shed inside the trailer behind the wall in the furnace room. May flipped to the final page. "If I'm gone, tell them I remember." Even when they tried to take it away at the sheriff's office, she sat across from Howard, the notebook open between them. He had read every page twice. "Are these names of other children?" he asked. "I think so," May said. Kala wasn't the only one. Howard stood and paced. "Why wasn't any of this in the case file? Why didn't CPS catch it?" "Because they weren't looking for anyone who didn't officially exist," May answered. "They rescued 3 kids. That's what they came for. Kala was already in the crawl space. Maybe the others had already been moved or worse." Howard ran a hand through his hair. "We need to excavate every single spot," she mentioned. May pointed to one of the drawings. "This says mirror trailer next to the fan. That's where I found the index card. There could be more in there. And the shed." May nodded. "That was always locked. We weren't allowed to go near it. Dad said it was the burn house." Howard didn't respond. He picked up the radio and called in a forensic crew. Bring everything, and I mean everything. 3 hours later, the trailer was opened again. Inside, behind the rusted utility fan buried in a false panel, they found 3 more index cards identical to the one that read unnamed bright hair. These read subject number 5, Tessa, too small, relocated. Subject number 7, Mira, defective, quiet room. Subject number 8, Angela, compliant, transferred. May stared at the word relocated and felt her stomach turn. Howard crouched beside the forensic tech. What the hell were they doing? May said nothing because deep down she already knew this wasn't just about abuse. This was a system, a selection process, and her parents hadn't been the only ones involved. That night, May sat in the motel room with a notebook spread across the bed. She'd laid out the butterfly codes. Each symbol led to a place. Each place had once hidden something or someone. She traced her fingers across Kella's entry again. Me, blue butterfly, alone. May whispered. You weren't alone. She looked at the entry below it. It wasn't a name, just a single sentence. There was one more, but I never saw her face. I think she lived in the wall. May froze. She turned to the photo again, the one from the rescue. Zoomed into the left corner of the image, far behind the porch, a sliver of a second face, blurred, almost camouflaged by the siding of the house. Too small, too shadowed. But it was there, another child. Not Kala, not May. Another girl, one who had never been seen again. May 10th, 2024. Location 1, 120 Firebrush Lane, West Wall. The photograph wouldn't stop burning in May's head. That blurred sliver of a face, nearly lost in the shadow of the porch column, tucked behind a rotting plank. It wasn't Kala. It wasn't anyone May could name. Yet there she was, another child, watching. May stood in the backyard the next morning, the photo printed on glossy paper enlarged and circled. She held it up against the siding of the west-facing wall, comparing the angles. The wood had warped over the years, but she could still make out the exact slat where the eye had appeared. Fourth one down 2 boards over from the corner. She was inside the wall, May whispered. Howard arrived minutes later, sipping his usual bitter coffee, eyes red from lack of sleep. You really think this is another kid? I know it is. He looked at the photo again. This shot was taken the day you 3 were pulled from the house, so either she was hiding or she was trapped. May nodded. Kala wrote about her in the notebook. She said she never saw her face, only heard her move behind the wall, called her the one who doesn't speak. Howard stared at the siding. We'll get the team, he said. By afternoon, a demolition team stood along the west wall. Howard supervised, gloves on, flashlight in hand. May refused to leave. They began pulling boards one by one, carefully documenting everything. Beneath the wood siding was the insulation, damp, moldy, nistrittled. Then a hollow thud. One of the techs stopped, knocked again, different sound. Not drywall, not brick, a cavity. They pulled the insulation back. Behind it was a hidden hatch, no bigger than a filing cabinet door, nailed shut from the outside with splintered, rusted finishing nails. There was no visible handle, just a strip of worn pink ribbon stapled to the top like a makeshift pull cord. The tech pried the nails free. Dust poured out. Then the door gave way with a low groan. The flashlight beam caught a pair of broken slats arranged like shelves, a flattened pillow, tattered bedding, a plastic Hello Kitty cup, and in the far corner, a name scratched into the wood. Elise, May gasped. That's her. Beneath it, a tally. Hundreds of them etched one by one. Some crossed out, some circled. A code only the girl inside would have understood. And beside the tally marks etched in jagged lines. Not seen, not chosen, not pretty, not loud. Still here, still me. Howard crouched. My God, this was a confinement cell. May stepped inside before anyone could stop her. The space was barely large enough to crouch in. The air was dead. Every surface had been clawed at, as if someone spent years trying not to disappear. She found another item on the shelf, a torn photograph. 3 girls standing in front of the house, all strangers. One of them held a paper crown. Another wore a tag number 9. May turned it over on the back in red ink. They took the ones who listened. That night, May sat in Howard's office with all the recovered materials. Kala's notebook, the index cards, the torn photo from the wall. Howard ran a hand down his face. 9 children, May at least 9. 10, she said softly, including Elise. He looked up. We haven't found remains. We haven't found her at all. Howard hesitated. You think she's alive? I think she was never meant to be found. May flipped through the notebook again. On one of the final pages was a butterfly marked in gray. Next to it, a name had been scraped off. Only the word remained. Static. And beneath that, the wall girl doesn't speak, but she listens, and she records. The next morning, a forensic technician returned from processing the furnace room. She dropped a bag on the table. Inside, a tiny magnetic microphone lodged behind one of the floor vents, rusted but intact. I think she was bugging the house, the tech said. Old tech, but still it would have picked up everything. May's heart thudded. They checked the west wall, found 2 more. In Elise's hidden space beneath the floorboards was a cracked tape recorder, its wheels jammed, its plastic warped with age. Inside a cassette labeled in pencil, I am still here. May 11th, 2024. Location, Floyd County Sheriff's Office. Evidence room. The cassette tape clicked into the deck with a soft clunk. May sat across from Howard in the sheriff's evidence room. A digital recorder was running to preserve the output. The tape had been cleaned, dried, and rewound by techs who specialized in degraded analog media. But May already knew whatever was on it was meant to survive. The machine hissed to life, a burst of static. Then a voice, small, hoarse, barely audible. My name is Elise. I live in the wall. I am not supposed to speak, but if you're hearing this, I'm still here. May gripped the arms of her chair. They put me behind the furnace first. It was cold. I cried too loud. Then they moved me to the crawl space. I counted the spiders. When I learned to stop crying, they gave me the wall. I was quiet. I was still, so they let me listen. Howard leaned forward. The other kids didn't last long. Some ran, some got sick. One girl stopped eating. Kala was the one who hummed. I liked her. The voice paused. You could hear breath staggered, shallow. He said I was a good ghost, a watcher, a recorder. He said if I was still enough, I'd get to stay, that the others were failures, that I was functioning static. May's blood went cold. They made me record what the others did, what they said. I had a button. If they disobeyed, I was supposed to press it. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. When Kala disappeared, I stopped pressing it. Another pause. Then a quiet scratching sound like someone fidgeting with the mic. This is my last tape. If they find it, I'll be gone. But maybe you'll hear me. Maybe you'll remember me. Because if I disappear and no one remembers me, then maybe I really wasn't ever real. The tape hissed. Another sound like footsteps or a door creaking. Then her voice again, urgent now. Don't look under the back steps. That's where they bury the ones that don't listen. Look behind the tree, the one with the broken swing. That's where I saw the papers. Click. Silence. The tape ended. May stared at the machine, fists clenched. She tried to warn someone, even if it killed her. Howard nodded slowly. We need to find that tree. That afternoon, May and Howard returned to 1120 Firebrush Lane with a cadaver dog and a forensic dig team. The backyard was overgrown. Kudzu, rusted chain link, thorn bushes that hadn't been trimmed since the mid-90s, but May saw it instantly. The tree with a broken swing, a twisted cottonwood half dead, its branches bowed like shoulders, and beneath it, a tangle of roots and overturned earth. The dog alerted within minutes. Shovels scraped down. At 2 feet, they hit a rusted lockbox. Inside were papers, yellowed, creased, and water-damaged, but readable. Howard opened the folder carefully. Typed letterhead St. Augustine Center for Behavioral Alignment date September 1985. Subject number 6. Elise has shown extended tolerance to long-term isolation. Receptivity to conditioning remains above threshold. Another page. Phase 3 candidates should be selected based on obedience over emotional affect. Previous failures i.e. Kala demonstrate that affection is not predictive of loyalty. May stared in disbelief. This wasn't just abuse, she said quietly. It was research. Howard flipped to the last page. A table of names. Subject number 3, May. Subject number 4, Kala. Subject number 5, Tessa. Subject number 6, Elise. Subject number 7, Mira. Each followed by a final outcome. May integrated Tessa relocated Mara quiet room. Elise retained Kala expired. The word made May recoil expired like she was milk that night. May sat in the motel bathtub with the water off the notebook on her knees and the tape deck on the floor. She listened again, not to Elise this time, but to the background. Between the words, between the breaths, was a faint sound. Click, or beep. May scrambled to her laptop and isolated the background audio. Boosted it. It wasn't white noise. It was a keypad. She wrote it down. 4 clicks. Pause. 1 click. 3 clicks. 2 clicks. A code. Back at the house, the old pantry door in the kitchen had a lock. Everyone assumed it led nowhere, but May remembered they were never allowed inside. She returned at dawn, entered the code into the digital lock installed after the fire inspection in 1985. 4,132 click. The door creaked open. Behind it, not shelves, not food, but stairs. Descending into something no one knew was there. May 12, 2024. Location 1, 120 Firebrush Lane, sub-level chamber. The stairs groaned beneath May's weight. Dust thickened with every step, choking the air like ash. The light from her phone flashlight bounced off walls that weren't stone or concrete, but soundproofed foam stapled in overlapping layers like a recording booth. The temperature dropped the deeper she went. The silence so complete it felt like a physical thing pressing against her skin. At the bottom, the hallway turned left, then right, then stopped. May stood before a steel door bolted shut from the outside. A small circular window, wire-reinforced, offered no view inside. But on the door's surface, someone had scratched 3 letters. SSC St. Augustine Center. She turned the wheel lock. It resisted, then gave with a reluctant clang. The door opened into blackness. Her flashlight pierced the dark. The room beyond was windowless, soundless, dry. A metal chair sat in the center of the floor, bolted down with 2 cloth restraints still tied to the arms. Nearby, a desk. On top of it, a Realtor recorder, wires strewn like veins. May stepped forward, heart pounding. There were 7 reels, each labeled by hand. Subject number 1 removed. Subject number 2 transferred. Subject number 3 integrated. Subject number 4 expired. Subject number 5 relocated. Subject number 6 static. Subject number 7 quieted. She stared at number 6. Static. Elise. There was no player, just reels. No way to listen without processing. But beneath the reels was a clipboard. The top page was a log sheet dated between 1983 and 1986. Each entry was a session. Voice conditioning, obedience trials, response to deprivation, static monitoring. At the bottom, one entry stood out. June 9, 1986. Induction failure. Subject removed to wall chamber. Observation ceased. Documentation sealed. The date burned into May's mind. That was the week CPS removed her, Bethany, and Mark from the home. They never made it down here. No one did. Footsteps echoed from above. Howard appeared in the stairwell, flashlight in hand. His breath caught as he stepped into the chamber. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. May handed him the clipboard. He scanned the entries. This is clinical. This wasn't just your parents. This was organized, and it didn't stop here." May nodded slowly. "They used our house as a trial site." Howard stared at the chair. "Why here? Why kids?" "Because no one was looking," May said. "Because no one listens to kids, especially not kids who were already broken," he swallowed. "This is bigger than local jurisdiction." May pointed to a symbol carved into the recorder, a butterfly split in half. "Kala knew," she whispered. "So did Elise. That's why they tried to record everything." Howard pulled out his phone and snapped photos. "We'll get this processed, chain of custody, and I'm alerting state investigators." As he moved toward the stairwell, May lingered by the chair. Her hand hovered over the restraint, and then she saw it carved into the underside of the chair. "My name was Elise, not Static." 2 days later, the story broke nationwide. Headlines called it the Butterfly Case, a hidden conditioning program. Children selected for their compliance. Locations buried under abandoned homes, schools, and church shelters. May's house had been one of many, but there was no record of who authorized it. The original staff files from St. Augustine had been lost in a fire in 1987. No arrests were made, just a wave of silence and a new list of questions. On May 17th, May buried Kala. A headstone was erected at the edge of a rural cemetery beneath a weeping pine tree, carved into it, Kala Dawson, 1981 to 1986, she remembered. And now so will we. Mark and Bethany came. So did Howren. A few survivors from similar institutions attended anonymously, leaving butterflies made of folded paper beside the grave. May stayed behind after everyone left. She placed the ceramic butterfly, the one Kala had clutched, at the base of the stone. Then she turned to the small velvet box in her pocket. Inside a tag marked number 6, she buried it next to the grave, one for Kala, one for Elise. That night, back in her apartment, May opened her laptop. She had scanned and uploaded every document, the notebook, the tapes, the log sheets. She created a folder titled Project Butterfly and set it to public. Then she sat in the dark and waited. At 2:17 a.m., a message pinged. Unknown user, I was subject number 9. I remember the tree. I remember her voice. Where do we go next? May stared at the screen and typed, we dig, we name, we remember, and we never let it happen again. May 18, 2024. Location, State Forensics Lab, Indianapolis, Indiana. The Rialto retape labeled subject number 6. Static took nearly 48 hours to restore. The metal casing was warped. The ribbon had fused in spots, but the data was intact inside a sterile sound lab. May and Howren sat behind a pane of soundproof glass while technicians queued up the reel. This is the last known recording made by Elise. The text said it's dated June 8, 1986, one day before the removal. The machine clicked on, then silence, then Elise's voice, calmer than before. Older if you're listening. I wasn't meant to survive. They gave me the wall, but I was never asleep. I saw everything. A mechanical hum filled the background. Maybe the recorder, maybe something deeper. They said they were watching us from the center, a place with glass doors and no clocks. Kala said they took her there once. Said a woman with red hair made her choose between a doll and a wire. She chose the doll. So they called her defective. May's hands clenched. I think they were studying how we broke. The ones who cried were sent to the quiet room. The ones who obeyed got names. Kala tried to help me. She left notes through the grate. She told me to hold on. The tape hissed, then continued. The last night I heard them fight, the man and the woman. He said, you let her get too close to the wall, girl. She said, they're just numbers. Then someone screamed. A door slammed. I never heard Kala again. Howren looked sick. May said nothing. She was still listening. I stayed quiet. I pressed the button. I let them think I was still, but the last thing I recorded was someone new, a girl crying in the furnace room. She said her name was Juniper. She never got a number. May's breath caught. Howren sat up. Juniper. They took her the morning you all were rescued. Said she didn't count. Said no one would miss her. I think they buried her under the shed. The tape clicked. Then Elise whispered one final sentence. Please don't let me be the last one remembered. May and Howren returned to the property with a full excavation team. The shed had partially collapsed over the years. Beneath its concrete floor, ground-penetrating radar revealed disturbed soil. At 3 feet down, they found fragments of a pink rubber sandal, a lock of hair tied in yellow string, and the corner of a child's dress, faded but intact. Forensics confirmed what May already knew. Juniper had existed. Even if no one ever filed her name, even if no system recorded her, she had been the 11th, the one after Elise, the one who was never supposed to be seen. On May 21st, May held a second burial. No last name, no records, no photograph, but a name carved into the new headstone. Juniper, the one they never numbered. That night, May added a new entry to the public folder. She titled it Subjects number 1 through number 11. Remembered. Inside, each child's name, real or chosen, was matched with their last known location, the symbol they'd left behind, and what little was known about them. Elise, Kala, Mira, Tessa, Angela, Juniper, each with a butterfly. May hit upload, then closed the laptop and walked to her window. Outside, the street was quiet, but in her hand she still held the last note Kala had ever written. They tried to make us forget each other, but we stayed in the walls, in the noise, in the wings. May whispered it aloud, then folded the paper into a butterfly, and let it drift onto the wind. June 22, 2024. Location: Butterfly Circle, National Memorial for Forgotten Children. 1 month later, on a quiet green hillside in Floyd County, a circle of smooth gray stones was arranged beneath a copper sculpture. The statue, 12 feet tall, resembled a child's hand releasing a swarm of butterflies, each one formed from salvaged metal, vent covers, old tape reels, scorched bits of ductwork recovered from condemned houses across the Midwest. At the base of the monument, a plaque read in memory of the unnamed, unnumbered, unchosen. You were not forgotten. You were not static. You were never defective. You were children. And you were loved. May stood at the edge of the circle, clutching a worn notebook in her hands, Kala's notebook. Behind her, families gathered. Some were survivors, others descendants of those who vanished. A few had driven hundreds of miles just to be there. Some held paper butterflies. Others held photographs of children whose names had never been written down. Mark and Bethany came too, standing a little apart. Bethany had started therapy. Mark was volunteering now at a missing children's nonprofit. Howard stood nearby, dressed in civilian clothes. He'd turned in his badge 3 days earlier. "They called you today," he said quietly to May. "The task force," she nodded. "I'm not joining." "You sure?" May opened the notebook. "I'm making my own list," she said. "The one still missing. The place is not yet searched. There's more than just this house." Howard looked at her carefully. "You really think this was just one site?" May looked toward the tree where a red ribbon marked another location being scanned by ground-penetrating radar. "I think there are dozens." 2 hours later, May knelt before Kala's headstone again. She placed a fresh ceramic butterfly at its base. A young girl, no older than 9, stood beside her. She was from Ohio. Her mother had driven her 5 hours to be here. She'd brought a drawing of a butterfly with 3 eyes and no mouth. "It was in my dream," the girl whispered. "The girl on the wall gave it to me." May didn't flinch. "What was her name?" she asked. The girl shrugged. She didn't say, but she wasn't scared. She said, "I had to remember the shapes." May took the drawing and gently folded it into the notebook. That night in her apartment, May opened a clean journal. On the first page she wrote, "The 4th child was never named, but she was never alone." She numbered the next blank line. Subject number 12, unknown. Reported in Missouri. Symbol, 3-eyed butterfly. Then she opened her laptop and began searching again.